Alright, time for another DraftScience video presentation. Why bother? But I will bother, because it's all important. All has to do with some kind of bigger picture of the truth and what the whole mission of science is, which isn't just to entertain, but is to actually glean information for use purposes and just for the sake of knowledge, to have the right answers, to live the truth, not just know the truth. And I'm arguing that clearly physics has lost the agenda. You could say some of the other sciences are getting a little bit weak. They way overplay certain kind of stories like, oh, did we have relationships with Neanderthals, and they turn it into some sort of soap opera drama thing, and they do this with the dinosaurs. They were really warm-blooded and they were all fancy colors, and so what if they were? It's really not very important. Fish are very colorful. So you would think that dinosaurs probably were colorful, but who cares? Not the big important stories. They're turning it into just more. The utility is just to create a commercial in the end to sell some products. It's just all lost all kind of integrity here. It's like giving everything to the common folk, to turn into garbage. Just kind of a sad commentary on what intellectuals, people who have been educated, have become. And I guess that's the key. They have been educated. They haven't hungered for education. It's been beaten into them. They're forced participants. No real passion. No sincere passion, let's put it that way. So this story is about a piece of physics that's just overtly and obviously rubbish. Just a silly little religious notion in the middle of science. Okay, just don't know exactly what to compare it to, because I just don't know if scientists ever made mistakes this big. It's just so there's this hundreds of years of some argument in the past. And the argument was in ignorance. Unfortunately, they didn't even have trains to metaphor, to make analogies for. They hadn't invented the wrecking ball yet. They hadn't invented bowling yet. They probably had some sort of games they played where they would realize that, make a lighter ball that moves faster, it doesn't have more energy, and it might occur to them. But I guess they just didn't have enough references in their everyday life. Except the obvious ones like chopping wood or something, where they'd figure out a heavier axe works better. Just kind of funny that they would think the lighter axe would. No, that wouldn't be observed. So they did have references, but they were so lost in starting to make science into some sort of mathematical theorem that they lost all sight, of the physical connection it's supposed to have, that the formula is supposed to be actually an illustration of a physical reality, that you should be able to write the formula in a picture, and actually draw it, in a sense, draw the function, draw how the relationship exists. And they lost sight of all that kind of connecting the math to an actual physical reality, and then do your replacements and see if they make any sense. Because basically the mathematics is just trying to do some sort of, I've compared it to the genealogy of figments, like gremlins and hobgoblins, and you can say, well, 3 gremlins equals 1 hobgoblin, and they can do all that kind of switching around. But the more they do it, they're losing a little bit of reality each time, because 1 gremlin isn't 3 hobgoblins. They eat as much as 3 hobgoblins, but they don't do everything else the same way hobgoblins do. So there's no point in making these exchanges with things that aren't exactly precisely accurate. And so when they do those equivalencies, it's dangerous. And that's the one that got them into this whole mess. But that's not how it started. It started as basically creationism. Okay, a guy who wasn't a great character in the sense that he is accused of stealing Newton's calculus, his invention. And so not a character above reproach for that reason alone. Kind of a conniver, a guy who just kind of wheeled his way into everybody's business. Lots of accusations can be made about his character. And it's clear that his agenda was clearly religious. I mean, he didn't like Newton's physics, partly because it made people kind of, when it came to religion. Newton was sort of saying it's a mechanical universe in his physics. Now, Newton was religious also, but clearly his physics wasn't. And this Leibniz guy kind of wanted people to be religious. He thought we're full of monads, and we had living force, and we were God's perfection. The universe was God's design, and he was trying to conform the physical universe to fit his vision of God's agenda. So it is kind of ironic that all these physicists talk about their atheism and how they're all atheists and all this stuff, and they're basically parroting the bullshit of a 200-year-old creationist. One that was appropriately defined as such. He just wasn't silly religious on the side. He was a proselytizer and had this ambition to stop the heresy, of a mechanical universe, one not run by a divine creator. But anyway, so there's this controversy for, say, 50 or so years, lots of arguments, and not very good ones, okay? They were using examples of levers and different mechanisms to try to support their theories, but no real good analysis of evidence in the sense of, taking the example of the axe, for example, and just pointing out how, well, show me the twice as much energy you get out of the lighter axe handle. A lighter axe head. How does it, where does this extra energy manifest itself as any example? And, if they would have done that, I think they would have come a lot closer to the truth if they would have forced there to be a collection of the evidence, and then the jury would examine all of the evidence. But instead, it's all segregated into quote mining the evidence. Two arguments that have been completely quote mined, where the truth doesn't matter. It's just about making the argument and persuading and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't a very good argument. And then the argument just kind of faded away as science altogether kind of faded away in the 17 and 1800s. Not much of it's going on, frankly. They're not getting very far. Yes, they found a few elements. They figured out atoms might have something to do with all this, electrons, protons. Yeah, they did some stuff. But big picture-wise, they really weren't going anywhere. And some of the same characters who got to define reality for us, Jung and other characters, whatever they believed, everybody else just accepted. They became some sort of the authority. And so one or two people got to decide how we think about what an atom is, or what how the universe functions. But the fact is, they never resolved this controversy. They just pretended it didn't exist. And then all the science writers, if you go back and look at the people writing about the controversy as a historical fact, seem to have this insipid bias towards, well, it doesn't make any difference. What's wrong with having two completely different answers to a question? I do that all the time. Somebody asks me a question, I go yes and no. It's fun. But that's what it comes down to. I mean, just a silly mischaracterization of the reality. They're two fundamentally different answers to a simple question. There is no compatibility. There's complete contradiction. One of the things a smart person is supposed to see, when there's contradiction, they're supposed to say something's wrong, not something's right. So anyway, so like I said, you can connect it to the whole wave-particle duality. Silly nonsense. There's a truth. Let's find it. Let's not pretend it doesn't exist. I mean, come on, just absolute garbage. So it has a terrible history, and it's just so grotesquely undefensible logically, and yet people are just continuing to defend it. And so, I might suggest to, all these popular channels that won't allow me to talk to them, or their audience, even if I offer them thousands of dollars to do so. One of them is going to be the first to say this is something that needs to be revisited. This is something physics needs to really look at and say, come on, these two answers, momentum and kinetic energy, there has to be a resolution, because these different answers can't be the truth. It's impossible for the two mechanisms to coexist. And they have the same problem with quantum mechanics and Einstein's relativity theory, because they do have the problem that it appears that they have to be the same thing. Gravity and the other forces have to be blended into being the same thing. They have the same speed. They operate based on the same rules. So lots of this is flawed. But that's a whole nother subject, right? The catastrophe of bent space is a whole nother subject. But this catastrophe is something everybody should be able to see and admit. They should be able to concede that there's just no way momentum gets wrong answers, and there's no way this silly squaring of velocity, whatever the frig that means, you could even mathematically demonstrate how a velocity is somehow a sphere, and you need to square it because it's diverging in two directions. Velocity is not doing any of that crap. So there's no logical reason to think there's such a thing as a squared velocity could ever be relevant. So anyway, so I'll read a comment that's just complete garbage, and then a Puro comment that's complete garbage. Doesn't address anything, doesn't get to the point. It is what it is. I mean, frankly, so clearly the resistance to admission is that if they admit that this formula was crap, that it's crap, and that physics didn't fix it, and physics embraced it and sort of played with it, even though it's a completely silly notion. Completely indefensible. Like I said, there's just no way to defend it. There's no experiment that demonstrates it. There's nothing that shows that this has anything like a glimmer of hope of being the right answer. I mean, it's not like a little bit wrong. It's completely indefensible. You can only use silly examples, to defend it. It doesn't have any defendability. I mean, really, you throw two things in the air with the same amount of energy, right? One thing that's half as massive as the other. They land back in your hand with the same energy. That the one that, by calculation, by formula, they say has twice as much energy. Yeah, it goes higher because it's lighter. We know that's how gravity works. So that's no surprise. There's just no evidence that anything has any extra energy. There's no evidence that, like I said, everybody who knows what a motor is and a generator, they know that it puts torque against turning. It doesn't like to be turned. Okay, that's the whole point of it making energy, is it's taking the energy from the thing's movement. The water's movement is being stopped. I mean, the generator is slowing the water down. It's stopping it from going. That's how it's generating power. And that, the lighter thing is going to be stopped. It's going to run out of gas sooner than the heavier thing. The heavier thing's going to plow deeper and longer. So it has just as much energy. Yeah, it's not going as fast, but it's going to keep rolling. You're not going to be able to stop it as quickly, right? I make a car out of cardboard, make it go fast. And I make a car out of real metal and real tonnage of mass, which one's going to be, I'm just saying, the truth. So why are we pretending that there's some possibility that velocity alone has something to do with how much energy something has? It's obviously mass makes just as much of a contribution. So anyway, yeah. So I'll read the comments, and I guess all I can do is reason. I can just give you logical understanding, and if you're just that belligerent, I mean, you just can't. You just can't give a damn about the truth. Then that's who you are and what you are as a brain. I mean, I can't fix that. I didn't think human beings were this deplorable, and I certainly didn't think college-educated human beings were this deplorable, that they would defend stuff that's indefensible because it's what they want to believe. Or they don't want to admit that their sacred, perfect science is corrupt and a bit broken and scatterbrained and, just cobbled together, not very well made. It's a crappy product. They work for General Motors and they just don't want to admit that, yeah, we haven't given a damn for years and the cars we make suck. Yeah, they just don't want to admit it. All right. So the Wicker Man, whatever the fuck that means. A light body and a heavy body have equal momentum. Which one would have the greater kinetic energy? Puts that in quotes with a question mark. So, clearly, all right, if one has less mass and they have the same momentum, that means the lesser mass has to have a higher velocity. But also just clearly, if you wanted to extract their energy through some disciplined scientific method, that is, you put a little generator motor on to see how many turns you can get out of them, you're going to get the same amount of turns out of both. So the lighter one will not make more energy. It won't light more light bulbs. It won't do anything you call energy. It won't do more of it. It just won't. Okay. The lighter body has more kinetic energy. It doesn't, see, the whole point is that you're asserting something. Well, why don't you prove it with a single experiment? One single experiment is all I'm asking for. Just show me one experiment where you extracted this extra energy, where you can show this extra energy existing. And it has to be an experiment. Like I say, you can say, hey, look, it goes deeper in clay. That's not a good test instrument. Okay, clay is not a great ruler for measuring energy. It probably is if you immerse the clay in water and then you calculate how much heat you created, because then you'll find out that the heavier object penetrated less but created more heat. It deformed the clay more. All right. It is easy to show with equations. So you can say that. I say they're horse shit. There's nothing in the equations that make any sense. There's no mechanical reason to put VMV. I mean, that's what they're really saying. Okay, it's not 1/2 mv squared. It's VMV divided by 2. No, it's, yes, VMV. The V is in there twice for no good reason. No sensible reason, no logical reason. There's no reason for velocity to be in the equation twice. No function. All right, it's easy to show with equations, but if you aren't an equation sort, it's not that I'm not. It's that you don't show anything coherent. You say it's a derivative. I've seen people do the derivative in multiple ways, and it just has to do with a bunch of replacements that don't make any sense. Frankly, they just don't. All right, sort of person, think about energy as a bullet. Yeah, exactly what I've been arguing. Think about energy as the fact that the bullet contains something and the other stuff contains something, and there's a certain amount of stuff. And the clear argument is that, yes, the more mass you have, the thinner the stuff is spread on your mass. And so the thinness would be a velocity. And that it always comes down to that. And you can follow it again into the environment. I mean, the whole point here is that this stuff can't be destroyed. And so the energy, if you don't see it in terms of an obvious thing like how far something goes, you can see it in terms of how much other stuff did it move. How much vibration did it create? How much heat is moving through other objects? Because all of that is the same thing. It's all the momentum, the movement. All right, if someone fires a gun, then to conserve momentum, So again, there's no point in talking about conserving momentum when you know you heated the gun, you heated the bullet. Now, you didn't count any of that stuff. That stuff's not in part of any of this equation, right? So that's all energy lost, so to speak. So it's not like it's some sort of lossless system. So again, the use of the word conserve momentum doesn't mean much because they use it so sloppy. No one's disputing conservation. What's being disputed is your notion that I made a whole bunch extra heat and that's where the extra energy went. I mean, that argument's just never been demonstrated. All right, anyway. They get sent backwards with the same momentum as the bullet is going forward. Yes, and again, another fact that it's not in dispute. And somehow I'm supposed to understand that, well, of course, if I'm putting a small amount of energy into a big object, the big object isn't going to move as fast. But yes, big objects can transfer their momentum as easily as anything else can, you know. But the point isn't about what shape I make it or how I form it. So another thing we all know is that if I shape something, you know, this doesn't have great penetrating power. But if I put a point on it, then I wouldn't want to be doing this anymore, would I? You know, if I put a needle point on it, you know, especially this way, right? Oh, yeah, it can't barely hurt me. Yeah, because I'm spreading the pressure over a big area and I'm vulnerable to punctures. I have a bias towards things that can puncture me because my surface is made a certain way. Now, if I was made out of steel, who cares if it's a pointy arrow? Okay, it's not going to mean anything. But to me, it does mean something. And so confusing that with its absolute energy, the shape of it isn't displaying how much energy it has. I mean, only an idiot would know that, oh yeah, what works better? You know, putting a flat rock on your arrow or putting a pointy rock on your arrow. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with how much energy it has. So if you're going to be fooled by something that obvious, I'd say you have little hope of doing rational science. I don't even think Leibniz was dumb enough not to realize how you shape the matter will change how far it goes into the clay. You know, if I shape it different, yeah, it'll go further. Duh. All right. As a bullet going forwards, if I give you a choice of absorbing the energy of a person who is kicked back by a gun. All right, well, let's use this kick back thing. Let's put the same exact charge in the gun. And we'll put a heavier bullet in. A light bullet and then one that's twice as heavy. Same exact charge. Now, the argument is the gun's going to have exactly the same momentum. Okay, it's going to have exactly the same. So even though one of the bullets is supposed to have twice as much energy, right? The gun's going to have exactly the same reaction. So if I pointed the gun into a little spear, it's going to spear just as deep into you. So if I change the shape of the gun so we can measure how deep it goes into your flesh, you know, and so we do it identically for both shots. The fact is the gun's going to go as deep for both bullets. One bullet isn't going to make the gun go deeper than the other bullet. And certainly the lighter bullet, the one that's supposed to have twice as much energy, that bullet isn't going to go deeper. If you have any intuition about which one's going to cause more of a reaction, an opposite reaction, clearly it's going to be, well, shooting the heavy thing means I might get more back. Not shooting the light thing. The lighter the thing is, the less I'm going to get back, would be the argument. Would be the intuitional argument. Now, I'm saying scientifically we know it doesn't matter which one. So, you know, what is this? You're telling a story that has nothing to do with reality. And you're just doing it again, this quote mining, this effort to bend evidence to make an argument, and this bending is just completely irrational. So you start with kind of a fake premise, you know, that you can magically make two different bullets. Like somehow the smaller bullet doesn't have to have the equal charge, or some other weirdness where you've created this difference. But if you ask them, we're going to use exactly the same amount of explosive, they're going to say, well, how can you change anything then? If you didn't change the explosive, you're not going to change what the gun barrel's going to do. You have to change the charge for the gun barrel to do something different. All right, backwards, the same momentum as the bullet is going forward. If I give you the choice of absorbing the energy of the person who is kicked back by the gun, I put them on roller skates and stand behind them, or absorbing the energy of the bullet by standing in front of the muzzle, I know which one you'll choose. So again, he says, absorbing the energy of the bullet by standing in front of it. So we have one container for energy that's huge. Okay, we didn't make the bullet, into a gigantic thing, a big, giant, beanbag chair or something. We didn't make it out of Jello. We didn't shoot the same mass of tomato sauce, the same mass as the bullet. Let's put tomato sauce in, and then shoot me with the tomato sauce. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get hysterically afraid. I mean, it's going to be unpleasant, but it's not going to do the same thing. It might cause a tattoo. It might shoot some tomato sauce into my skin, but it's really not a big threat to boring a hole in my heart, is it? So it all depends on how we shape the projectile. And you don't understand that shaping them differently is going to fundamentally make them different in terms of how they're going to interact with the world. Get real. I mean, you kind of know that if you shape the front of your car into a giant spear point, that you're going to do a lot better in accidents than the guy you hit. You have to know that. And you also have to know it's not going to have a damn thing to do about your energy. That's not going to have anything to do with it. But just pretend. Okay, so these are horrible arguments. Just horrible. As science. This isn't science. It's terrible. Or absorbing the energy of the bullet by staying in front of the muzzle. I know which one you'll choose. Then again, all I have to do is change it. I change the barrel into a pointy. I change the stock of the gun into a pointy thing right in the center of your heart. Okay, and then I put, instead of a bullet, the same weight in little tiny styrofoam dots or something. Yeah, which which side of the gun now do you want to be on, butthead? It's just such bullshit. Anyway, the bullet has a high speed, low mass, and high kinetic energy. Let's understand, it doesn't have anything called kinetic energy. It's just bullshit, okay? It doesn't have twice as much energy as the bullet that weighs twice as much and is going half as fast. That bullet has just as much energy, just as much penetrating power if you shape it correctly. And I can find different experimental catching methods, okay, that give a bias to the heavy thing. So just as there are catching methods that have a bias, that is, they'll react more dramatically to faster things, you can also create catching devices that have a huge bias for heavy things. So is that the way you want to do your science? Is to keep measuring with your crooked rulers? I mean, the rulers are crooked, right? I mean, I'm not informing you of something you don't already know, right? That a lump of clay is a different way of interacting than a hard steel ball or something. That those are very different mechanisms for catching energy or transferring energy or interacting with energy. Clearly, the steel can only interact in the tiny portion of its mechanism. Only the tiniest little bit of it interacts. The exchange has to go through one tiny little piece where the two steel balls hit each other. Obviously, with clay, there's a whole bunch interacting. They're spread over a huge area, the interaction. All right, the bullet has a high speed, low mass, and high kinetic energy, and the same amount of momentum as the low speed. So again, it just doesn't make any sense. I'm going to say they have the same momentum and they have different kinetic energy. And somehow that makes sense to somebody on this planet who has reasoning skills. I mean, momentum is energy. There's no other way to look at it. It's a description of energy. How can you possibly say momentum means something? What does momentum mean if kinetic energy is real? What the hell does it mean? It means, but momentum gives you this silly answer. So no, forget about momentum. It'll just confuse you. Don't think about its momentum. How the fuck could that make any sense? They're the same except they're different. They're different, but they're the same. I mean, how can you possibly think that would be a logical thing for a scientist to do, to point at something and say, that's completely different, but identical? Yeah. It's exactly the same, except completely different. All right. Same amount of momentum as the low speed, high mass, low kinetic energy person who is pushed backwards. So again, just absolute mush as a response. Has nothing to do with anything that happens in the real world. So again, the bowling example I think is a good one. Now, somebody in the comments, if you want to show other examples, I'd appreciate. So the wrecking ball is one example, right? So in the real world, we don't see little wrecking balls being swung fast into buildings because, yeah, even though it's supposed to have twice as much energy, right? If they made the ball half as big, right, and just swung it, because it will swing faster, all by itself, the same amount of movement of the crane will produce the extra velocity. So why aren't all of the wrecking companies using the little tiny ball instead of the big giant lead giant thing? Why are they doing that? Why are they using this big heavy wrecking ball when little ones have twice as much energy? And just imagine if they go even smaller, they could go half size, but if they went quarter size, now they got 4 times more energy. Why aren't they doing that then? Why aren't they knock down buildings with bullets? Right? Because they're gaining so much energy. Just thousands of times, 100 anyway. 100 times more energy. If they put their gasoline in cannons and shoot cannonballs at the building, they'll do so much better. Anyway, stupid. It's just stupid. But the bowling one, like I said, is just so obvious. We understand, people can understand that, yeah, the light ball, when it hits a pin, it's going to lose a lot more of its momentum, okay, technically. It's going to degrade much quicker than the heavy ball. The heavy ball can hit a pin. Oh, yeah, I can hit another pin. I can hit another pin. I can hit another pin. The light ball, I hit a pin. I hit a pin. Oh, I'm tired. I can't do it anymore. And we just see it in the real world. I mean, okay, a professional bowler doesn't say, oh, I got to find a lighter ball because I can throw it faster, and by throwing it faster, I can double the energy, the ability to knock down pins. And so I'm just saying, intuitively, that can't be true, or everybody would be going lighter and lighter and lighter all the time, because lighter means more energy, more capacity for your thing to do what you want it to do. And it's just not true. If what you want to do is extract the energy, if what you want to do is use the energy to do work, if you just want to use the energy to go distance, yeah, go lighter. Lighter things go further, okay? Because they absorb force less effectively. That's why they go further. But that's it, okay? You don't gain anything in terms of actually doing real work. Real movement of other material objects. Again, if I put a generator on the bowling ball, do you really think the 8-pound bowling ball versus the 16-pound bowling ball, if we just put a generator on it, and generated the electricity, do you really think the 8-pound ball is going to light twice as many light bulbs? Not a chance. All right. So, stupid. I mean, it's a polite enough comment, all this kind of stuff, but I mean, you can't see that this is a trivial argument, and you certainly haven't shown me an experiment that demonstrates this. Again, show me one fucking experiment where, if it wasn't for the kinetic energy formula, we would get the wrong answer. Show me one example, or show me one example of just the momentum completely screwing up. Completely confusing you, giving you a wrong notion of energy. No, none of that'll happen. That's just tragic. Alright, Bruce Lee, when photons are alive, please explain. Oh, that's a Ken Wheeler video. Well, clearly when I was saying it, I'm talking about the idea that photons are force. Okay? I don't mean they're alive in any living sense. I just mean they're clearly objects with momentum moving very fast. Anyway, New Age thing. Okay, so I'm not an expert. We already did that. And this guy adds some sort of crap. Let's see. Infinity is just a word my math-trained brain used to describe something many orders of magnitude smaller than other things. Yeah, well, whatever. That's probably the part of the problem with math then. I mean, it's, you should be able to get the idea, though, that, that this is dangerous. And that, Einstein's singularity problem. This whole idea that I can just make the gravity well infinitely big. That's problematic. All right. So then he says he's not religious, okay, and hostile, blah, 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 like blah, 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 blah. Yeah, well, anyway. Well, we've already dispensed with it. But, yeah, I get your point. It's okay for you to comment, but, I don't think your English is all that bad. But, like I said, the word intuition isn't a very good word to inject into a debate, okay, about truth. Because sometimes intuition just doesn't have anything to do with it. Perhaps the fundamental base for energy is incorrect. Whose base? What base? I'm pointing out how momentum never gets the wrong answer, so I guess momentum works as a base. I mean, the idea that objects momentum is imposed on them. They have it. It's a thing you carry. It's in you. Okay? It's not something else. It's a property of you. When you have it, you're different than when you don't have it. There's a difference in your little atoms and shit. They're doing something fundamentally different, and that's why you carry the energy. The inside cannot be the outside. We're done, right? I mean, baby talk, what? Yeah, no sense at all. So anyway, let me see if there's any new comments, and then I'll just do Puro and say the hell with it, I suppose. I mean, we are a half hour into this, right? So there's no point in me dragging it out. But this is a real conversation that should take place over the evidence. What does the preponderance of the evidence demonstrate? And by preponderance, I mean every single experiment that is carefully analyzed. Oh, they demonstrate that momentum gets the right answer and kinetic energy is a fallacy. It's just made up, silly, gremlin nonsense. It has absolutely no use. It is only getting a wrong answer, a completely fallacious, silly notion. It has nothing to do with reality, just absolutely nothing. All right, let's see. Puro says, again, without capitalizing anything, you are not making energy, you're making more momentum. So what context is even that statement made in? I mean, you can't even tell what the hell you're talking about. What are you talking about? We're not talking about making momentum. We're talking about objects, okay, that are pushed by exactly the same spring force, for example, or they're thrown with my physical body. And the simple logical argument is if I take something that's relatively half the weight of something else, I can throw it, relatively speaking, twice as fast. Doing my best to throw it as hard as I can, I will be able to impart on the lighter object twice the velocity. The question is, since I used exactly the same amount of muscular capacity, force, how could one of them have twice as much energy? If I applied the same force to them, how is it possible that one of them has twice as much energy now? Where did all the extra energy go for the thing that doesn't go as fast? How did I lose so much energy throwing heavy things? Yeah, you won't be able to dissect any of that. All right, you're not making energy, you're making more momentum. So there's no whatever more momentum is. I have a train going 10 miles an hour. We'll keep going back. Weighs 5 tons going 10 miles an hour. I have another train 10 tons going 5 miles an hour. You're saying this one has twice as much energy. I'm saying no matter what device I use to collect the energy, any reasonably scientific device, a spring or a magnet, pushing a north magnet into a north magnet, that what I will read on the scale is that they have exactly the same energy. I'm asking you to explain where the faster thing has innately more energy somewhere, that it has more capacity to push a spring, or more capacity to push into a magnet, or more capacity to move bowling pins, or more capacity to knock over chickens, or more capacity to run over frogs, or more capacity to do anything that is measured, by something that gives you an accurate reading. Now, if you want to see which one goes further, off a ramp, yeah, we all know which one's going to go further, but that does not measure of its energy because it's lighter. We know that lighter things travel farther, because they have a higher velocity. It doesn't mean they'll make a bigger hole in the ground when they land, though. Jesus. That they will push more particulates of matter into energetic behavior. Yeah. Anyway, you're making more momentum, and this is because you put the energy in the smaller package. So again, the size of the package, we all should agree, is not what we're discussing. I can make bullets that are less offensive by making them, spreading them out and making them thinner, and I can make big bullets more dangerous by making them pointier and doing something else to them. So this isn't about the shape of the package. This is about the total capacity to move elements in the universe. That is, how many pieces of styrofoam, how many pieces of anything can it move? Can it transfer its energy to? And if I measure how much energy it has to transfer, what's its total transferable energy? It's not going to, there will be no experiment that reveals the lighter object to have more transferable energy. The bullet will only hit a part of the target but tear through it. Exactly the point. So it has nothing to do with its energy. The fact that you can puncture things, puncturability is not the ruler for total energy. That's doesn't tell you what its energy is, whether you have shaped it for puncturing. All right. The bowling ball has the energy spread out a lot of work just to move the object. So again, if I point the bowling ball, if I put a spear on the bowling ball, it's going to be just as lethal as the bullet. Just a fact. The momentum, the energy it's going to be able to tear your flesh with will be equal then. You will equalize the receiving of the momentum. So all we need to do is put a little hinge in the bowling ball. Yes, we'll lose a little bit to the bearings, and shape a nice steel point, on the bowling ball. And then we'll just shoot you with a bullet, or we'll shoot you with the bowling ball spear. And the fact is that you're going to be just as dead. All right, the bowling ball is going to have the puncturability now. It'll be able to penetrate deeply into you and puncture your vital organs and arteries. So we've made it just as lethal. And so again, you're just pretending you don't even know that it matters how you shape something. Of course that matters. And it matters what you're hitting. How elastic is the crap you're hitting? How much pressure can it take in a moment of time? And yes, certain things fracture. I can put a lot of pressure on a glass, but if it's spread out, the glass will survive. If I do it very quickly, if all the pressure hits it all at once, it shatters. We know that. That's a fact. It has nothing to do with energy. Again, it doesn't have anything to do with your total energy. It just has to do with how you're imposing the energy. So you can punch a piece of glass multiple times, use thousands and thousands of watts of energy, vibrating the glass. And you know that you could take 1/10 or 1/millionth of that energy and just impose it once, very briskly, and break the glass. It doesn't mean that the one poke has more energy. It just means that that's a vulnerability of glass. Glass has a bias for speed, okay? Fast things will break glass. Slow things, not so much. So again, this is stuff grade schoolers could get these concepts. And you're forcing me to do it over and over and over again, explaining grade school concepts, that shape isn't a defensive, this isn't, the shape doesn't define your energy. Okay, shape has everything to do with it in terms of what will happen in the world, what it'll look like, but it doesn't have anything to do with defining how much capacity, okay, raw capacity, raw volts, raw watts, raw joules, raw energy it has. And that's what you're defining. You're saying your kinetic formula is defining its real energy. I'm saying there's not any evidence for that. There's no logic for that. There's no theory for that. None. Zero. Every piece of well scientifically performed experimental evidence indicates that's just a pile of crap. All right. But no doubt, somebody else will just keep arguing, because they can't concede something that's quite obvious. They let creation scientists do a lot of physics in the 17 and 1800s, and that was a big mistake, because it does have flaws and it is corrupted by their agenda. Okay, so and they need to fix it, and they're reluctant because, again, fixing one piece they'll have to admit that maybe there's other pieces that are complete bullshit also. So that's what's their real fear here. They can't concede anything. Because conceding any flaws means there might be more. And they know there's more. They know how weak this physics is. And that's what makes them deplorable characters. Because they're just trying to cover up that weakness. Because it's a religion. That's all it is. They believe dogmatically. They believe by personal preferences. They want the universe to be a wacky place so they can excuse their own wackiness. They don't want a world that says you're an asshole loud and clear. And that's what real science will do. Real science will tell the truth and reveal all of us to be terribly flawed, and the whole project to be a pile of shit. Malicious, torturous nonsense. And that's the truth they're running from. It's one of them anyway. So, they just have a special club, and they've invested in it. They bought the ring, they bought their cape, they bought their emblem, and then they're going to find out that, Superman's a rapist. Oh shit. And they bought the costume, they have the underoos, and I have to reclaim, his character, because I have invested in this silly little story, and now I'll look ridiculous that I invested my whole life in this silly nonsense that just couldn't be defended rationally. And I'll be embarrassed because, I'll look stupid. Why was I defending crap? But you don't see how you're going to look even dumber when it's revealed that you sit there and tried to defend a rapist? That you tried to falsify a bunch of evidence to defend a rapist? I mean, you're going to look even worse. You sat here and hysterically overreacted to protect something because you invested 59 cents in it. I mean, come on, just grow up and smell reality. It's not going to make you look better. It might get you through the end of your life feeling like you're not the fraud that you are. Okay, you won't be revealed as a fraud while you're still alive, so I guess that's the only part that matters to you. Yes, but once you're dead, you're going to be revealed as a big, fake, phony fraud who did despicable things for despicable reasons. So live with that. Because that's your truth. That's the truth that has to roll around in your, your maliciously evil brain. Because obviously if you had a decent brain, you couldn't let that roll around. You couldn't let some doubt, well, maybe that is what I'm doing. You couldn't, if you were a decent person, you'd be troubled by that. And you'd say, gee, I really don't want to be doing the wrong thing here while I'm here on this planet. I don't want to be doing stupid, retarded shit. I don't want to be defending the wrong side. I want to be defending right and good. That's what a decent brain is going to want. You know, they couldn't live with the dichotomy of, oh yeah, well. And the fact is, you're displaying that it has to roll around your brain because your arguments are so lame. Your arguments are so bad that you can't believe them. You have to know that these are just insipidly silly arguments. I mean, it has to do with what shape it is. Yeah, duh. That's the whole point, idiot. You say it has more energy, not more shape. Okay, not a more penetrating shape. You say it has more intrinsic energy, and that if I made them the same shape, that somehow your thing will do more stuff. When it won't push the spring any further. I mean, he plays pool, so I wonder if he thinks, oh, it's just too bad that pool balls are, you know, the cue ball isn't twice as light, because then you could get twice as much energy out of it. You know. Jeez. Too stupid. It's just all too stupid, really. Yeah, it's too stupid. So, there's just no hope. Well, there's hope, but, well, there really isn't. Well, I shouldn't even have said the word. It's just a useless concept. Is there good reason to believe they can be reclamated? Is there any reason to believe reclamation is possible? That these beings lost to bullshit, you know, sinking in their bullshit sand, that they will allow themselves to be rescued. That you could stick their hand out and say, come on, let me pull you out of the bullshit. That they'll take the hand and be pulled out of the bullshit. Are they so emphatically lost in their shit that they will just drown in it? I don't know the answer. Yeah, no. It's looking not too good, frankly. It's looking like people are exactly as I've described them. They don't just suck because they're belligerently shitty. They're shitty in spite of all the evidence. They just don't care. That's the key thing. They just don't care. They're poo eaters. That's it. And they won't admit it, you know, and they'll fight against the accusation, but they chow down every day. All right, till the next time and such, and so forth and whatnot. It's been DraftScience video presentation and such.